Welcome to my review of episode 5 of Your Honour, and this one won't take too long because there's not a great deal to talk about really, and it moves at a snail's pace this episode, even more so than the last one. And again, I just feel very frustrated with this show and the direction it's taken after the promise, at least, of the end of last week's episode. And it sort of feels like there's this issue with this kind of show where, I don't know, it feels like it's trying to do too much. It's trying to create this other drama and this sort of plot for the other characters rather than staying focused on the main sort of plot. And it's just sort of meandering about with it without any great sense of purpose or just doing anything that original. It's sort of coming off as a little bit shallow. So I'll just talk a bit about the end of last week's episode and the whole fire business, because we knew that came from Jimmy's end, because his wife Gina had again pressured him into doing something, into making a statement. So the fire basically was at the site of the vigil for Rocco, and it basically killed off Kofi's mother and her young baby, because she had a young baby. And so in this episode is going to lead to a potential turf war, because we get to know more the characters who had been talking to Kofi's brother, like the younger guy who had been sort of hanging around him and sort of promising to look after him and his family if now Kofi's out of the picture. So we get the sense of this other side of the conflict. So Jimmy's action basically sets off this thing. Now, first of all, I find this a bit weak. I don't quite understand the motivation from Jimmy's side of the things. And I understand that it's sort of a dispute and they're sending a message. And of course, gangsters aren't always known as the most rational of people, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense for them to do something like that at that point. And it does smack of, just to create a bit more drama, just to draw out this sort of conflict in this plot. And it just feels again like it's trying to play on the racial theme again, which obviously is fine because that's part of the show, but it just doesn't feel very natural with what it's doing. But I don't get the motivations behind it, because as far as Jimmy is concerned, Jimmy and his wife Gina, at that point, the person who committed the crime, who killed Rocco, he's behind bars, but he's now dead. They know Kofi's dead, and obviously we know that Kofi didn't do it. But at that point, the Baxter family think that he did. So I'm a bit murky on why they would then take further action when Kofi at that point is out of the picture. So from their point of view, that's already been avenged. But I was a little murky on that. I could sort of see what they were going for, because I think it's meant to be the bigger picture of this turf war. But I just I wasn't really that convinced that they would take that action when the culprit in their mind had already been taken care of. So what this sort of leads to is almost this Wire style plot where Kofi's brother is sort of convinced to join in the other side of this dispute, the other gang, and you get this gang leader, this sort of slightly older woman who's kind of talking to him almost like a mother figure, and she offers him money, and obviously the youngish guy is still involved, and it appears as though at one point that Kofi's brother starts dealing drugs and starts getting in on that end, and you're like, really, we're doing that? And the problem is, it just feels like Wire light, if you like, because it has none of the subtlety of The Wire, or none of the like performances or the direction or anything like that. And it just feels like a bit of a needless plot just to kind of draw things out. You sort of feel that the focus should be on the case itself, and should be on, as I said last week, Lee sort of pushing things on her end and investigating things, which we do get a little bit of in this episode, but I think I would have liked that to have been more of the main focus. So we see Lee at one point visit the neighbourhood and starts talking to Kofi's brother, and then the other guy kind of muscles in and is basically making threats. And he's like playing up the whole sort of racial working class card. And I mean, Lee is actually African American, but he's kind of looking down on her because she's like a lawyer, and he sees her as being from the other side of the tracks, and just things like that. But Lee is trying to get through to I can't remember the character's name, but Kofi's brother, and trying to get him to help her so that she can find some justice for Kofi. And it looks like he might be coming around at one point, because he actually tells her where she can find Kofi's father, who we find out obviously was separated from his mother. And Lee talks to him at one point and persuades him to sign off on a signature so that she can go and get a second autopsy, because clearly she doesn't trust the original autopsy. So that happens, and the autopsy does reveal that there has been some tinkering, and that there's some sort of foul play, and it's not as simple as things were made out to be in the first one. So I think you can expect some more on that next week with Lee. The other main stuff in the episode is mostly with Michael, where you get like another sort of comedic scene with him in court with his phone, where it keeps ringing, and the first few times he thinks it's like somebody in the court, and he kind of gets upset, but then he realizes then it's in like his drawer, so it's his phone, but it's a new phone which he wasn't aware of, and he starts getting these like secret messages and basically saying, we know it was your son, but he has no idea who it is. He tracks it to New Orleans, and they start making all these threats, start saying, well, if you don't give us this money, this amount of money, we're going to blow the whole thing. We're going to blow the cover, because we have proof that your son was involved in the accident, that he killed the Baxter kid. And at one point, Michael is trying to get the money out, but the bank won't let him have it all, because it's like this massive withdrawal. And he sort of drives to New Orleans, and he sort of calls their bluff. Like when they're calling him on the phone, he basically says he doesn't think they have the evidence, and calls them out on it. But then they send a picture which is of the service station, like the video on the day in question, so they're like proof. I had to laugh actually, because they send him like an emoji which seems to be of a face like winking or something. It's like, okay, maybe a step too far with the emoji, but whatever. So that's sort of that end of the plot, and Michael's very conflicted. again, with that, I think maybe they maybe make too much of a jump. I think it's just to show the paranoia with Michael, but you do wonder if maybe he could have stood firm originally and maybe just not been so quick to jump and say, okay, I'll go and get the money for these guys. But it obviously seems like they do have proof and they can do some damage. Um, there's little bits and pieces with the Baxter family. The main one is towards the end of the episode, which it did feel like it was a long time getting to. But what happens is the woman who's running the other side of things, she obviously hears she comes to Jimmy with, well, not exactly proof, but she says to him, Kofi couldn't have killed Rocco, and that's because um, the car was stolen after Rocco's death. The car which supposedly Kofi had stolen. It was after Rocco's death in the timeline. And that leads to Jimmy and his like main right hand man, if you like, then checking out the surveillance, and they start doing some checking around, and they come to the surveillance garage with the guy from a couple of episodes who Michael was talking to in the bar, and who he sort of got close to and basically swiped the footage so there was no more. And actually, one thing I did like is that they returned to the Dylan Thomas joke because they show like a picture and he sort of says, yeah, he calls him by Dylan Thomas again. And I don't know if they're going to push that joke any further. Like they might do a thing where they're looking for this guy called Dylan Thomas instead of Michael. But anyway, he sort of gives them enough that they realise that, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't right. It obviously wasn't Kofi, because also Gina and Jimmy listened to the surveillance sort of tape of all the surveillance of the call which Adam made on the day of the incident, and that first arouses their suspicions that this guy made the call and then he sort of hung up, and that there was potentially this is the guy, not Adam, or sorry, not Kofi. So this is what sets this all off. So by the end of this episode, Jimmy and his sort of gang, if you like, are getting closer to the truth. So it felt like a long time getting there, but it does set up some potentially good stuff in the next episode. There's just tidbits really besides that, like Jimmy's son is now out of prison, and there's some stuff with them which I didn't really care about. I was kind of bored, so you just see him talk. He obviously sees his sister again, and they haven't seen each other for a long time. There's a bit of a moment with him, and I think they're just setting up this thing of him being very like macho and almost like what you'd think of a typical gangster son, and he hugs but he makes some comments towards her, and because she's like just joking about just the norm, I've just been up to the usual sleeping around and all that, and when he says it, so he just makes an offhand remark about the guy better well watch him, and she says all woman, and I mean, I don't think she is gay just because later on there seemed to be a moment with her and Adam, but I guess it's possible she is, or I think it might have been just her messing with her brother sort of thing, because again, they're sort of highlighting the whole religious sort of thing and just how sort of behind the times, like I think the Baxters are meant to be. Um, But there's just stuff with them, with the son obviously now released. And later on, I hinted to it there. This is again very coincidental, but the daughter does see Adam in a coffee shop. He's like there studying, and they start talking, and Adam, opens up about his mother being dead, and she obviously talks about obviously Rocco, and Adam briefly knew Rocco. I mean, obviously he's involved in the incident, but I mean, besides that, he kind of says, "Well, I met him once at this particular thing," and it's quite a nice scene because she sort of is quite open with him and is saying things like, "Well, they said my brother didn't suffer; he died instantly," but then they have to say that sort of stuff, and it's quite a playful scene. She has a fair bit of humour and sort of gets him to open up, and she does this mock interview thing because he's applying to be in college. So it's a decent enough scene. It's just one of those things again which is very heavy handed, and you can see exactly where they're going with it because it's like, oh, you know he killed Rocco, and now they're going to have him having some sort of relationship with the sister. It's like, yeah, okay. I don't sort of see this going very well, but it's an alright scene, as I said. So that's the episode. Pretty bland stuff. Once again, I have to say that's episode 5 of Your Honor. If you've been following it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.